Why does it feel like Gen X never got the credit they truly deserve? Think about it. You hear endless debates about baby boomers versus millennials, and now Gen Z is all over the headlines. But the generation right in the middle, the one that shaped the culture we still live in today, rarely gets mentioned. Gen X is the forgotten generation, but maybe that's exactly why their story is so fascinating. Sandwiched between two loud and influential groups, Gen X never had the luxury of owning the spotlight. Boomers were credited with building institutions, and millennials are seen as reshaping the digital era. Meanwhile, Gen X, smaller in number and quieter in presence, just got on with it. They worked, they built, they adapted, and they kept everything moving. They were also the original latchkey kids. This was the first generation to grow up in large numbers with both parents working or navigating the rising tide of divorce. That meant coming home to an empty house, making your own snacks, and figuring things out on your own. From a young age, they learned independence, resilience, and adaptability. While the stereotype was that Gen X were cynical or detached, what really developed was a powerful self-reliance. They became the work hard, figure it out yourself generation. When it comes to technology and culture, Gen 10 were the pioneers. They were the first to embrace personal computers, home video game systems, and the early internet. They created much of the music, movies, and subcultures that still shape the world today. Think about grunge, hip-hop going mainstream, indie film, MTV. Those cultural revolutions weren't led by boomers or millennials. They were Gen X, and yet when people look back, the credit often shifts. Boomers get praised for building the foundations, and millennials get attention for riding the digital wave. Gen X is left in the shadows, even though they lit the torch. In the workplace, Gen X were game changers. They brought balance between the old school loyalty of boomers and the flexibility championed by millennials. They were early adopters of freelancing, side hustles, and even remote work long before it was mainstream. And they often became the bridge generation at work, managing the older boomers above them while mentoring the younger millennials below. They quietly held organizations together during times of massive change, but rarely demanded the spotlight for doing so. Culturally, Gen X carried an identity that's been misunderstood. In the 90s, they were labeled as slackers, painted as cynical, sarcastic, and disaffected. But behind that image was something more complex. They were skeptical, not lazy. They were pragmatic, not apathetic. They didn't trust institutions blindly, and they weren't afraid to question consumerism or authority. That skepticism actually paved the way for the modern conversations we're having now about authenticity, burnout, and the need for real work-life balance. Another overlooked fact: Gen X raised the digital natives. They're the parents of millennials and Gen Z. They grew up with analog childhood's rotary phones, mixtapes, and Saturday morning cartoons, but adapted seamlessly to digital adulthood. That unique perspective made them incredible guides for their kids, who grew up in the fully connected world. Yet, when we talk about parenting influence, the spotlight rarely lands on Gen X, even though they raised two of the most influential generations alive today. So why didn't they ever get the credit? The truth is, their generation was smaller in size. Born between 1965 and 1980, they didn't have the same political or economic clout as the massive baby boomers or the equally massive millennial wave. Their contributions were overshadowed by louder generational narratives. And many Gen Xers were simply too busy working hard, raising families, adapting to rapid change to stop and promote themselves. In a way, they lived out the very stereotype placed on them. They stayed quiet, got things done, and didn't ask for applause. But their legacy is everywhere. Gen 10 are the quiet leaders in tech, entrepreneurship, and culture. They are role models of resilience, independence, and the ability to adapt without losing themselves. They bring the grit of an analog world with the fluency of a digital one. That balance makes them uniquely powerful, just without the headlines. So maybe it's not that Gen X never got the credit. Maybe it's that they never asked for it. And maybe that's the secret to why they matter so much. They didn't shout, they didn't posture, they didn't try to dominate the conversation. They just lived, worked, created, and adapted. They kept things running in the background while everyone else argued about who deserved the spotlight. And that, in itself, might be Gen X's greatest contribution. They showed us that you don't always need recognition to leave a legacy. Sometimes, the most influential generation is the one you don't even realize has been holding everything together all along.